You don't get over the loss of someone who's died. You have to change in response to what's happened in your life. How many of you think you will ever stop missing a person who died in your life? If you don't know what to say, better than running away because you can't think of the magic words to say, a very easy thing to say is,
Hello and welcome to Awake at the Wheel. So today we are joined by applied philosopher Thomas Attig, who is here to discuss the deeply human experience of grief, resilience, and how loss can transform the way that we understand ourselves and the world around us. Welcome, Thomas.
it's great to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Of course. So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your professional background.
I started teaching philosophy at Bowling Green State University in Ohio long ago and far away. And I had been trained as a phenomenologist, a philosopher who learns techniques for describing and interpreting a broad range of human experiences, and existentialism, philosophers interested in exploring ways of living a meaningful, finite life, one that ends in death. And I began teaching what I was trained to teach and some ethics courses. And I'd been teaching for a couple of years there, and they invented or established a new College of Health and Human Services featuring courses in nursing, social work, gerontology, child and family development. And I thought, given what students had expressed interest in the courses I'd been teaching, that they could use a death and dying course. And a lot of my colleagues were teaching things like medical ethics, business ethics, philosophy of law, applications of philosophy. So I thought I didn't know anybody else teaching a course on death and dying who was a philosopher, but I could try it. I proposed it. They said, yeah, go ahead, do it. Originally, I thought, well, we could do some ethics classes related to death and dying. And then I thought the work that my students would be doing or preparing themselves to do would rarely involve ethical issues, but all of them would have to go into rooms where someone was dying or where a family was grieving. And most of them would be very uncomfortable in doing that. And I better prepare them to do the kind of work they're going to do related to death and dying. So I set them up to do a lot of self-reflective exercises. And one of the exercises I asked them to do was to write a short essay about their three most important loss experiences. Hopefully, they had deaths to write about, but if they didn't, other losses would do to get at a lot of what we were going to get at in the course. They wrote hundreds of these things over a few years. None of them ever spoke of 5 stages of dying or grieving, either one. Um, and they focused on how their world was quite different with the person having died. And I'll just give you some examples. There were several who talked about what are we going to do with the things left in the closet and in their room? How are we going to eat at night with an empty space at the table? Um, some wrote about we didn't know where the money was going to come from. He was the breadwinner, and now he's not there. Mom was in a panic. Uh, Another wrote about how do I speak with my grandmother? My father just died, and I just realized now she lost a son.
Mm-hmm.
I'm used to talking to grandma, but not about this. How am I going to do it? And it was a real problem for me. People talked about not wanting to go to church, where people seemed not to be very supportive. They talked about how their friends, people that they thought they could count on, all kind of ran away from them because they didn't know what to say or how to help them, so they just kind of disappeared. A most dramatic one that I had was a young fellow, probably in his early 20s. He went into the living room of his home, and his father had a gun in his hand and was thinking of killing himself. And his story was wrestling the gun out of his father's hand and saving his life.
Wow.
Um, that was the kind of variety of thing
Yeah.
I was getting. And after a while, I thought, you folks are dealing with major changes, and your life is going to be different, and you're recognizing all of that, and you're puzzled about how to go from here to there. What if I told you that to me, it sounds like you're talking about grieving as not just an emotional moment that you sort of live beyond, but your life is changing in a radical way. And what you're challenged to do is learn how to live in a world changed profoundly by a loss. And they all went, that's it.
Yeah.
You might be the first guy who's understanding what I'm going through. And I started writing, and this is me introduced in a real short capsule. I started writing essays in the 1980s, and in the 1990s, I proposed to Oxford that they let me write a book called How We Grieve, Relearning the World, and they did. And then a few years later, I wrote one called The Heart of Grief, Death and the Search for Lasting Love, acknowledging that so many of the people that I talked to, almost everyone, unless they had a really bad relationship with the person who died, they wonder, how can I love someone who isn't here anymore? And finally, recently, that's why we're here now, because this book was published, Seeking Wisdom in Death's Shadows. And it's not only about grief, but it's primarily about grief. But the shadows of death are our own mortality, bereavement, death, um, dying, witnessing dying, and grief, coming to terms with what's happened. And it's sort of like an intellectual autobiography. It's sort of the evolution of my thinking through 3 or 4 decades, pretty seriously about death and dying. And that's who I am, at
Okay.
least for today's purposes.
Amazing.
I could tell you about growing up in two very large families. My dad was one of 10, my mom was one of 9. She
Wow.
started reading letters about death in the family when I was 5 or 6, and she read them out loud to the whole family. So I got very used to death and dying in those
Mhm.
families, and a lot of people didn't. I didn't intend ever to write and teach about death and dying. I was gonna do mathematics, but eventually it came to the course that I just described for you.
Yeah. And it's so interesting what you say, and, in our clinical practices, we sadly deal with grief, in many different scopes, on a regular basis with our clients, but, I think it is one of the not I think, it is one of the most universally experienced things, and yet, people struggle so profoundly with it, and it's something that is so, infrequently spoken about, so I'm excited for us to talk more about your work, your findings, and perhaps the perspective that you've taken that might differ from traditional, grief work, like you mentioned, the 5 stages of grieving. I presume that your work maybe departs from that a bit.
I I think it's misconceived as applying to grief at all. It applies pretty well to the initial population that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who came up with the 5 stages, had in mind. She had been working with dying people, and when people are dying, they've gotten word from physicians and the like about what they think is going to happen given the illness or condition that they have. And there's a lot of ambiguity and a lot of uncertainty afoot. Maybe he's not reading the results right. Maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about. Maybe I'll be the exception rather than the rule. So that's working toward denial. They tell me it's this way, and I'm going to live like it's not this way until something really convinces me otherwise. And um, people can get second and third opinions that start confirming themselves. And then there's this second ego reaction. Denial is fight or flight. All right. And it's, I'm going to fly from this. All right. And anger is, I'm going to fight. And if I'm angry enough, I can control this and it won't happen. And then it keeps getting worse. And then you go into the third phase, which is bargaining. Um, Maybe there's a way I can change myself or change how I'm living or get another doctor or get another opinion or whatever and find someone who tells me that I'm really not in for this. And when all three of those fight or flight defenses fail, the fourth phase is depression. Pardon my foreign language. Oh shit, this isn't working. All right. Everything I'm used to trying with problems is not working. It looks like I'm really dying. And then they get to what they call acceptance. Yeah, I'm definitely on my way to being here no more. Now, when someone has actually died and the body isn't missing, they're there. You're in the church, you're in the funeral home, you're in the viewing room for the first time, or you've been brought in and into the room where they've been living their last days and they've just died. And the nurses are with you and the doctor's with you. And sorry about what's happened here. We'll take care of you in every way we can. We'll call the funeral home for you, et cetera, et cetera. When you've got a dead body, there's no ambiguity. You are seriously troubled if you try to deny it. All right. When you're facing it, when you can touch it, when you can kiss it, when you can look and see what has happened. Now, you might be angry, but it would be kind of unusual. You'd probably tend to be thankful that these people are being quiet and gentle with you, and they want to help you as much as you want to be helped. Um, there's nothing to bargain with. You can't undo a reality that is staring you in the face. You might experience some depression. You're probably just going to cry and weep, and it wouldn't be like what a psychologist is looking for when they're looking for a diagnosable depression. And acceptance is sort of what you do very reluctantly, almost from the first minute. So it just doesn't apply to what
Hmm.
happens when people are grieving. Relearning how to world, being challenged to shape your life differently, your everyday life, being challenged to enter unanticipated next chapters in your life where a major character is going to be missing and you don't know quite how you're going to go about living in those days without him or her. That captures it. The existential phenomenologist in me says, this is a pretty good description. When I came out with it at first, I was capturing a phrase that a man named Colin Murray Parks had used, and he wrote about a paragraph or so about relearning the world. I just developed that idea in spades, and it was called by some, this could be a revolutionary change in how we think about grief at the time. And it's one of the views that's still standing and widely respected and widely used. I've seen an awful lot of counselors who tell me that the book is How We Grieve is on their shelves. It's right there over the
Amazing.
computer. There it is.
Yeah.
So I feel good about what I've done, and I've not felt that I had to take anything back. And I've been defending this thinking for about 40 years. So
So you mentioned that a big revolutionary piece of your work is that perhaps traditional grief work doesn't look at adjusting to the way the world around us changes and the way that we proceed in the world changes. So, what are people often missing in that respect?
what are they missing?
Yeah. So, like, what either does traditional grief work miss, or the individuals going through the grief,
They
how
mi-
are they missing the mark with that?
well, the traditional five phases rarely, if ever, describe any experience anybody has. That's all they're missing.
Hmm.
They're missing the whole story that I'm in the process of telling you and your audience. It's as if they never listened to someone. Well, I mean, a lot of what happens with grief in this world is that professionals aren't particularly well trained, and they're among the people who want to get out of the room as fast as they can, or they don't go into the room if they haven't been directly taking care of the people who were in there after someone has died. Um, and I think there's a general view of grieving as the bad stuff that comes over you when someone has died, the tears, uh, catching your breath, feeling lightheaded, like you can hardly stand. You haven't got the strength to go on. You wish it would all go away, and it just beats on you. And
Yeah.
that's all that grief is. It's the hurt, it's the pain, it's the sorrow. And people give bad advice by saying, um, take all those bad feelings that you have and express them, and
Mhm.
keep expressing them until you feel like you don't need to express them anymore, and you'll be over it and you can go on.
Yeah.
No, you don't get over the loss of someone who's died. You have to change in response to what's happened in your life. Um, Psychologists, you guys are among them, distinguish between reactions. That's sort of what happens to us physically, psychologically, emotionally when someone dies, and responses. Reactions are passive. We feel helpless. We feel powerless, choiceless. It just comes over us. There are aspects of experiences that are like that, including loss experiences. But there's also responding, which is when we engage actively with what's happened to us. We make choices. We decide we'll go in this way as opposed to that, or we'll talk to a lot of people, or we'll retreat from talking to people because it's too hard. We'll feed ourselves or we'll let somebody else feed us. We'll welcome people into the room or tell them you really want to be alone. That's beginning to make choices. And you have bigger choices about how you're going to reshape your daily life and how you're going to redirect where you go into your future. And a lot of people think there's nothing attractive available anymore. These poor people have lost, and their experience ends with the horrors of loss, of feeling as if you've been deprived. I mean, the word bereavement means deprivation. All right. Uh, and what you do, you feel depressed and bereaved and deprived for a while, and eventually you get over it somehow and go on living.
Mhm.
That's just a weak account of what happens and what people are asked to do,
Yeah.
required to do if they're gonna reshape their lives.
And I wanna highlight something really important that you said earlier, and I think that it ties into the larger message that you're, um, portraying here, that I think in large part of society's hesitation, fear, stigma surrounding death and dying likely comes from, fear of having to encounter what they perceive as only those negative feelings and experiences and so on, largely ignoring oddly enough, some of the good things that can come out of that grief experience.
I think that, if you only look at reactions, it's just dark.
Mhm.
It's the shadows. It's the hard place where you can't imagine what to do.
Yeah.
Uh, and people welcome and are prepared, really, to be in hopeful experiences. They want to see some kind of hope that's possible in these dark times. And my thinking offers that. And if you stop at the 5 phases where you're done grieving when you reach acceptance.
Mhm.
Yes, he's really died, and that's it. That's the
And
end of it.
then dust your
No,
hands and move on, yeah.
that's just not what the end of it is. So what can you be hopeful about? Well, living well again with people who survive with you, who are still people that you cherish in your life. I mean, if, say, you're a father with um, 3 children and your wife dies, it's horrible, but your life didn't end, and you
Mhm.
still have responsibilities for those 3 kids, and you want to be a good father for those 3 kids, and you want to be able to help them be hopeful and happy and loving, in the days they'll be with you. That's where Hope resides in the good stuff you still have and the good stuff that you could fold in as you reshape and reintroduce new elements in your life. Suppose you have to sell your house because you don't have the means to keep making the payments and you have to move your family into a smaller home. You can have happiness in that smaller home. You can be hopeful about that. You can be working toward that. We're going here and we're going to feel miserable for the rest of our lives because dad isn't here
Yeah.
is not the message you want to give to your children.
Hmm.
You want to say, this is going to be hard and we're all hurting and I'll hug you and I hope you hug me and we'll talk about mom and do everything we can to get used to her not being here. We will not forget her. We'll tell stories about her. We'll smile again and laugh with her again. We'll watch the movies that she liked to watch and so on. And we're going to do something new, just
Hmm.
the four of us, not with mom
Yeah.
anymore.
And
Uh,
this isn't just theoretical, right? And Oren, I'm sure you've seen this many times too, that like, yeah, in the midst of the grief, it feels awful and it feels hopeless. But I've had the privilege of seeing people through years later in their grief journey and the changes they've made in their lives and the resilience that they were able to develop, the overcoming of the adversity and so on. And these are again all the really positive things that can come out of, the worst times in people's lives.
Well, we've got a lot of freedom and we've got a lot of ability. Let me just work with a hypothesis or two. Um, yeah, let's do that. I think a big thing that we can be hopeful about, and the second book that I wrote was looking for lasting love. Well, how can you love someone in separation? Is a kind of a big question. How can I love her if she's not alive and breathing in the next room, and so on? And imagine that we were in an auditorium and I'm standing up in the front of the room and you're talking to me on stage. And I turn to the audience and they're listening out there. So that's where the audience is today. How many of your listeners, if I had a live crowd, I'd ask people to raise their hands. Okay. How many of you who are listening today were in the audience, if we imagine one being with us physically, raise your hand if you think when you left them and came to be here where we are today, they stopped loving you. Nobody would raise their hand. All right, now it's more important here. How many of you who are here now know that when you left all of them, you stopped loving all of them? How many of you stopped loving all the people you left behind? You've just told me that you are separated from all of these people that you love in your life, and you don't stop loving them when you're separated. Why would that have to be any different when they died? Well, how do we love them when they're not around? Well, they're not around now. How are you loving the people you left behind right now? Is there anybody in the room who is remembering them? Can you remember their name? Can you remember and say the words, I love them? Well, you're doing it. Okay, how do you do it sort of more generally? Do you ever talk about them when you're not with them? Do you ever remember them fondly? Do you ever kind of laugh with them when you think of the funny thing he or she said or did the last time you were with them? Do you ever feel inspired by them when they're not with you? Sure. Do you ever feel like you learned some important life lessons when you're not with them? Sure. Do you remember the funny thing they said the last time they were funny? Sure. Have they ever fed you? Have they ever clothed you? Have they ever taken care of you when you're sick? Have they ever come to visit you when you were troubled? Have you ever had a meaningful conversation that you can remember with
So
them?
I think the general retort to that would be, but the finality of death, I think, is what trips people up.
Yes, but what is it about the finality of it? The finality of it is you won't have any new experiences with them. And how many of you, let's put it this way, how many of you think you will ever stop missing a person who died in your life? Nobody raises their hand. I'll never stop missing him. I'll miss her the day I die. Right? How many of you think you're going to stop loving them somewhere along the line in the next years to come? No one thinks they're going to stop loving them. All right. So much for closure in grief. A lot of contemporary thought is work toward closure, work toward shutting off the relationship. There were people who advised that. Sigmund Freud came pretty close. Complete decathexis, take the emotional tug out of remembering the person, and so on. Nobody's willing to do that. Nobody wants to do that, and nobody will be forced to do it or required to do it. Looking for closure, a lot of people out there who are counseling people who are grieving say that's what you need to do.
Hmm.
Why? You can have the benefits of all that remembering, all that inspiration, all that appreciation and gratitude for what you have been given that you still have from the person who died. Um, I think that's a better message to give to people than work really hard on expressing everything that's bad, and when you're tired of expressing it, you'll be done with grief. And that's kind of the traditional view that gets given to people, and that's terrible. And we have
Yeah.
this incredible capacity not only to react, but to respond, and to respond in meaningful ways. I wrote a whole book called How The Heart of Grief, and that's filled with, I think, 82 concrete stories of how people can do loving things, feel loved by people who have died. And they're pretty much the same things that 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 you can right here in a studio. When you think about people who are somewhere else now, you can do to feel loved and be loving in response to the life that's ended, and that's perfectly compatible with pangs of sorrow coming over you when they do. And then you kind of know that eventually you can cry your tears that you need to cry now, and appreciate what you're still appreciating, and look for how is it that about this aspect of what I really love this person, I can still interact in a different way that doesn't require their physical presence in my life. And it's a good message, I think. Now, uh, I've just been reading some things, and somebody wrote a review of the book I just wrote here, and they seem to have trouble in my kind of emphasizing the positive things about relationships. I'm not naive. Anything that's bad in a relationship can be re-experienced after a person has died. And
And
sometimes
highlighted.
there are horrors
Yeah.
that have traumatized people, all right? And psychologists have plenty to do to help people disentangle from bad aspects of relationships after a person has died. It's a little harder that you can't talk to them and interact with them personally, and so on, but um, the relationships I'm talking about are the full range of experiences that people have with people they think of as they love who have died. And most loving relationships are multifaceted, and some of the facets will grip you in ways that will blind you to the good that you're still holding on to. And if you can't do it yourself, you can go to a mutual help group. If it's a really, they've abused you, but you still want to love your father in some way. Psychologists can help people find the good stuff to hold on to and help them let go of the bad stuff. And some of it can be traumatizing. And very few people that I know of are very good at getting past traumas in their lives by themselves. And thank God people are trained to help people with that kind of challenge in a relationship. And I think in some cases, relationships have been so bad, people have wanted to be loved by their father their whole lives, and it seems like they never have been. If you can help them to find just a grain of there was a time when you were 3 months old and he actually fed you himself, and then he threw you in the corner. Remember the feeding? He had that look in his eyes just for that moment, and we gotta help you let go of all the rest so you can say, "He wanted me, and then I showed up and he didn't want me anymore. He wanted me. Help me get to that point, and I won't make it the center of my life, but it'll be a crumb that I can hold on to so I can let go of being angry at him as much as I have been, and the like," which is what traumatologists do, on my understanding. Anyway,
Yeah, and
let's
Oren,
move.
I'm wondering if you can talk a bit more about, like, practically speaking, what that would look like in therapy and specifically holding on to the positives, like Tom described.
Well, I mean, it's a blend, I think, of philosophical, practical, pragmatic, reality-based approaches, which is, I always tell people, whether you're working with someone who's alive, who's you're still engaging with, or someone you've lost, or I say you actually have to sort of disentangle the emotions and recognize that they can both be true. So the most common thing, as you're saying, for example, if you have anger at somebody, or resentment or hurt or something, that's one emotional pathway. And then a
Mhm.
lot of people, when they express it, they experience it, they kind of ping pong between that, and then they feel guilty. Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
now I'm speaking poor, ill of the dead or something like that, and and then they're bouncing back and forth between these different emotions. So I help people kind of process each of them separately. Okay, and I say the goal is when you can process them separately and give each of them their full weight. Yes, your father did this or your mother did that and so on, and then, not denying it, because a lot of people, they think it's a zero sum game. I have to
Yeah.
suppress one in order to experience the other. I say, no, no, you can
They're
experience
both.
them both. They're both, but you've got to be able to integrate them, synthesize them, rather than ping ponging between the two of them. So in
Yeah.
therapy, whether doing talk therapy or what there's called emotion focused therapy, where we really disentangle those emotions and again really process them without and letting somebody know it is okay, even if it's a loss, someone you've lost, it's okay to recognize the negative, because if you try to deny it and you only try to focus on the positive, that there's something in the back of your mind, that unconscious, something that's just telling you that something's wrong, something's off. I'm distorting reality. You may not
Uh-huh.
consciously be aware of it, but you feel it. You feel when you're not doing justice to your experience. So
Yeah.
in therapy, like I said, is trying to process all of these different things and then being able to integrate them and then finding practically, how do I go about, living my life after the loss of a loved one? And I'm going to say, I can answer it myself, but I'm going to ask you, Tom. Uh, One of the, and I'll say what I say to the patients afterwards. But if someone came to you and said, "But I feel that moving forward is dishonoring, well, the
Oh.
person I loved." Okay, whether it's
Mhm.
just being happy for the first time, or whether it's finding another partner after having lost a partner and so on, what would you just say to somebody who says, I just can't move forward because I don't want to dishonor them in that way?
I've met grief groups where they vowed together to be sad together, to do honor to the people who have died. And I offered them ideas about moving forward, hopefully, folding other aspects of experiencing the person who's died. And they said that they thought that would be dishonoring. My thought, at least one thought, I'm going to tell you a story in a little while about blending, but my thought was I think if you ask people gently to think about what would those people want you to do with their memory, most of them would say, he'd want me to go on living and being the best me that I can be because he loved me. And that would work for me. For some, the relationship might be tangled up enough that that's easy and you have to work some more. But I think that's ultimately what you're going after. Your mother didn't stop loving you because she was going to die, and she never wanted you to be an unhappy boy or an unhappy girl in the days and years after she died. What they really want is for you to remember them in some loving way and be grateful for something that they did or said, and that you're hanging on to it and keeping them in their hearts and so on is really what they had in mind. But that disentangling can be tough. Here's the story. I was giving a talk one night and I had a mixed group. I can't even remember who was brought into the room, but there was this man who came up to me at a kind of a break time and he said, I want to tell you something that I've experienced. I had a great son, and a couple of years ago, he killed himself. It wasn't accidental. It's very clear he took steps to deliberately end his life. And I was mad and I was furious and my heart was just broken. And I thought, I loved him. How could he do that? And how could he do that to me? And then I thought a couple of big thoughts, and I'll get to the climax thought. He had to be hurting terribly in some way, or he wouldn't have chosen to do what he did. Usually when my son is hurting, I feel sorry for him, and I want to help him. I can't help him. But as I think of my relationship with my son and raising children in general, none of them are ever perfect. And I don't have to love everything that they've done, minor infraction on up to really big time. I can love my son and not love everything he did. In fact, I can hate something that he did, but still love him. And how many people have children in prisons or incarcerated for some reason or another? They've offended somebody else, hurt them terribly. I take offense at what they did too, but I still love my son who's in prison for another 10 years, and I'm going to go keep visiting him and the like. The idea that this is the balance you were talking about, you can love somebody, but not everything that they did. And where that idea that you're supposed to love everything that they do comes from, most of us have an idea that everybody we love is fallible and they can make mistakes and they can do things that aren't so nice. And you hope it's not you, but if it is you, you still work your way through to forgiving them for that thing. And you don't demand that they beg for that forgiveness. You just give it because it's easier to live in a forgiven problematic relationship than one that's still gnawing at you and the like. And I take it that's the kind of thing that you were talking about. It was a big lesson for me. And it seems so simple when you think about it. When you love somebody, you don't love everything that they do. And sometimes it can be offensive or harmful to you or to others. But if it's your kid, if it's your dad, if it's your mom, if it's your brother, you go out of the way to take all of them and say, this is a person I deeply care about, and I'm not going to stop doing that. And if anybody asks me about killing themselves, I'm going to recommend in the strongest terms, don't do it. People that who survive you are going to be in a lot of pain. If you intend to hurt them, well, you have to live with that, but really don't do it. And
Yeah.
you can you can say that if my son spoke to me, I would have told him in the strongest terms, do not do this. I will restrain you if I can. But after the fact, part of who he was he was a person who was hurting bad enough that he decided he had to be dead.
So
Um,
Tom, interestingly, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but I'm hearing some like religious underpinnings maybe in your view of grief and maybe part of your conceptualization of it. Am I seeing that correctly or no?
I I'm marginally religious. I'm spiritual. I think we're on the edge of my spirituality.
Yeah.
But
That's kind of what I'm hearing, and I think that's
yeah,
really cool, and I think relevant as well to perhaps what helps some people process grief
yeah, I think
differently
people
than
are
others.
after having meaningful experiences,
Yeah.
sort of no matter where they are and what they're going through. And holding on to anger is not nearly the kind of meaning I want to live with.
Hmm.
I want to be in a place where I'm understanding people having really difficult times in their lives and sometimes doing things that I hope I would never do because of the pain that they bring into other people's lives, especially people that they love, and so on. But I don't think I don't buy into some of the religious accounts of people supposedly being perfect. I think being forgiving, honestly forgiving, is a good way to be,
Yeah.
because otherwise you're carrying baggage that's just pounding away inside of you. And life is too short. I'm only 80, so uh, I don't have time for that other stuff. It's true. I'll be 81 next Saturday, July 4th.
Amazing. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, so one thing, because we always, again, we're looking at a kind of a blending of philosophical, existential, but also practical matters. So, a quick question for you. So, I've been asked this many times in the media, and I always say the same thing. I say there's no one right way to grieve. There's no one right way to support people who are grieving. I say, but there's lots of wrong ways. So, one of the wrong ways, when you're trying to support someone, let's just look at the supporting side, which is, saying something that comes across as a cliche, trite, like just something that it almost, it just doesn't resonate at all. It's almost offensive. So I'm just wondering, so for someone who wants to support someone who is grieving and you don't know where they're at, you just see that they're so lost, they're in the midst of bereavement, what would you say to somebody would be the best way for them to be a support to someone in that state?
I think I'm going to tell you two quick stories. A woman used to come with her husband to my classes. They founded a mutual support group for bereaved parents. They had a 3-year-old daughter. On Friday, she fell off the swing in the backyard, went to the hospital. On Monday, she died. Turned out she had an undetected incipient illness in her brain, and the fall precipitated the thing moving fast. So she went to the funeral, and she's climbing the stairs, and the pastor's there in the door, and he holds out his hand and shakes her hand and wraps his other hand on top of hers. "Congratulations," he says. "What? You have an angel in heaven." She said, "If I could have mustered the strength, I would have punched his lights out on the spot." All right. She was not happy with that response. He was presuming all kinds of things about where she was.
Right.
Later in the week, she got a phone call. She's back living at home with her other child and with her husband. And she gets a phone call from a woman who lives down the block. And the woman said, "I know you really don't know me. We've passed, and your little girl has come down and played in my yard quite a bit, and you've kind of come and stood at the fence and watched them playing. But we've never really introduced ourselves and so on. But I understand that and I don't know what to say to you, except I can tell you I took a lot of photographs. And if you would like to come and have tea or coffee with me, we could look through the photos together. Would you like to do that?" She scrambled down to that woman's house. All right. I think in general, if there's some kind thing you can do or offer, that's a reasonable response. If you don't know what to say, better than running away because you can't think of the magic words to say, a very easy thing to say is, "I don't know what to say to you. I know you've had a terrible experience. I care." And then you kind of hang in there and see where they want to take it. Maybe let's go sit down. I'll tell you about my daughter a little bit, might be a response, or "I really don't feel like talking now, but I appreciate what you have to say. Would it be okay if I called you?" That's the kind of thing. If you really don't know what to say, don't try to say something thinking
Right.
you're going to do magic, because you're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and that's an easy one. Don't wrestle with "I don't know what to say." Say, "I care, but I really don't know what to say,"
Yeah.
and let it go from there.
Yeah.
And if then you don't turn and walk away, you know, I
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
people stand
That's
together in
yeah.
silence. If
Exactly.
someone
And
feels
just know that
motivated to do something that
yeah.
they really feel motivated to do, then
Right.
good things happen. But
Yeah.
magic words, especially make it better words, aren't available. Get
No.
over it. Or
Yeah.
let that go.
Right.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Tom, how do our listeners find your decades of work? Like, this has been such a lovely conversation. And again, like we talked about from the beginning of the episode, it's something that I think is stigmatized and not talked about enough. And very few people are equipped to deal with the realities of grief. But again, I think your decades of work do lay out some things that people can do. So, how do people find you?
Several things. All the books are available from Amazon, which is where a lot of people find them. Um, I would prefer and suggest that you, if you're really interested, go to Oxford University Press and enter the title of the book, Seeking Wisdom in Death's Shadows. You'll be taken to a page where you can see a full description of it, table of contents, sample chapter. You'll decide whether it's really of interest to you. If it is, you can push the little button saying you want to order it, and you'll be taken to a page where you can buy 1, 100, 1,000. I think 1,000 would be good. Maybe a couple of shiploads if you're really interested. But one at a time, I guess we can start there. There's a place where you can enter a promotion code, and you'll get a 30% discount. So a $35 US book would cost you $24.95 or thereabouts. Put in AUFLY 30, 5 letters, 2 numbers, AUFLY 30. When you put that in, however many books you want will be marked down to the $25 number, and buy the books, and they'll be sent to you.
Amazing. Okay.
And the others are also available from Oxford. If you wanted to buy a bunch, Oxford's the best way to go if you want to break on that one. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
They're the editor of Death Studies. This is a man named Bob Niemeyer. Calls the book a masterpiece. I wept when he told me that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah.
He's known worldwide, and we had him here this last summer with his new wife, and a couple of times he called me his teacher, and I said, Bob, I've heard you call me something I haven't heard before. Do you think of me that way? You bet. So that's testimony enough for
Wow.
feels pretty.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, Tom, thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today and share your wisdom with our listeners. It's really been wonderful.
Yeah,
Let me just add one more thing. I see that
Yeah.
you've got specialization in trauma and so on. I've got a couple of friends named Terry Rando and Ted Reinierson, and I'm hoping that you know the work of both of those folks. Trauma is amazingly complicated and challenging and too widespread for decency's sake. It's one of the hardest things to disentangle yourselves from. And if you're having success with that, I just admire what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Well, and on that hopeful note, until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your hands upon the wheel.